in 1 week from today, specifically 1 week from the filming of today, 4 o'clock, November 3rd, also election day. Make sure y'all go out and vote. Make sure you perform your civic duty. We also have the trade deadline the same day for the NFL. I mean, I feel like Roger Goodell wasn't thinking about it too well when he planned this, but nonetheless, that's where we stand. And we have some trade rumors that are going around. We want to talk about some buyers. We want to talk about some sellers. We have a list of names that y'all should be watching that you guys need to take notice of, and then possibly take a look and see if you agree where we think that these players will end up if they get moved at all. And we'll tell you whether we think they're going to get moved. So let's start off. It's not a very long list, but the first and foremost, we look at Jets quarterback Sam Darnold. It looks like they're in line for the number 1 overall pick. Obviously, that they're tanking for Trevor, assuming that he comes out of Clemson this year. News came out of Clemson, South Carolina today that possibly might want to stay in school. He's going to take it, in stride and kind of decide. But you also have Trey Lance out of North Dakota State and Justin Fields out of Ohio State, and those guys will most likely be in the draft. So with that being said, the Jets will be looking to make a change at quarterback. They're going to probably bring in a new head coach so they can make those decisions. But Sam Darnold on his way out of New York. Nick, where do you see the best fits here? Do you think he gets moved?
Unfortunately, I don't see Sam Darnold getting moved at the deadline. And it's very upsetting for Sam Darnold fans. And it's upsetting for Jets fans because you want to have that clear path ready to go for Trevor Lawrence, and you don't want this to be a conversation in the offseason, because I think if there is a clear line for Trevor Lawrence to take over this team, he's more likely to come to the NFL. I don't think he wants to come into the NFL and be competing for his job against Sam Darnold. Not saying that he wouldn't win the job, but I just think that's not a good spot to be putting a rookie quarterback. And Sam Darnold has so much talent that's being wasted that it would make a lot of sense to trade him. I think you can get more trade value for him now than you can in the off season,
for sure.
But that's just not how the Jets organization has run themselves over the last few years, especially with Joe Douglas and Adam Gase. So I don't see him getting moved, but if there's any teams that are going to pursue him, it's definitely going to be the Cleveland Browns. I don't care how good Baker was last week. It's 1 week. You have the Indianapolis Colts, who have Phillip Rivers, who's doing okay, but he looks terrible out there. He just physically looks terrible out there. And then you have the Chicago Bears, and we saw them last night in one of the most boring games I've ever seen. And the Bears offense is just struggling because they have the most mediocre quarterbacks on their roster. So those 3 teams should really be looking to trade for Sam Darnold now, while they're all 3 teams are going to the playoffs. They will be in the playoffs. So they need to pick up Sam Darnold. They need to trade for Sam Darnold if they want to make it past the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with all of those sentiments. Baker Mayfield, you talk about somebody who's hot and cold and can't decide what he's going to be until it's game day. I don't even know if you can even say that, because he started the game 0 for 5, and then went incompletionless the rest of the way, or almost the rest of the way.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. So I think Baker was just that ship has sailed. I think he's got to go. The Colts and the Bears definitely make a whole hell of a lot of sense. The Colts have a defense that is holding this team up, as does Chicago. The Colts, they need to utilize their draft picks that they have. They need to utilize those to bring weapons around their new quarterback. So if they don't have to focus on bringing in a quarterback, and they can swing a deal for Sam Darnold, or fix some stuff on the back end of the defense at corner, maybe. I think that's where they're best suited to really start to finish this rebuild after the post Peyton Manning, post Andrew Luck era of the Indianapolis Colts. And again, as Chicago has learned, Mitchell Trubisky is not the guy. Big Dick Nick Foles ain't it either. As much as he led Philadelphia to the only win they'll ever talk about for the next 50 years. He's just not it. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut, and he is the current version of Brock Osweiler. He was able to do something really well in the postseason and got paid millions and millions and millions of dollars for it. He just ain't it. So I think that the Colts and the Bears make the most sense for me. The Browns as an organization are probably not ready to give up on Baker Mayfield, even though we all believe that they should. But the Colts and the Bears definitely, for me, are the front runners. Over to our sorry-ass team, the New England Patriots. It looks like, as much as I love him as our starting quarterback, Cam Newton could be on his way out. I think he's done enough to showcase his ability to throw for a contending team. He's on a 1-year deal, and we're looking at certain teams that need a quarterback, and specifically the Dallas Cowboys. I don't think they're going to ride the rest of the season with Ben DiNucci at quarterback after Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, who took over for Dak Prescott, got injured on a very egregious play.
Decapitated.
Yeah, I forgot who it was.
It was John
linebacker
Bostic. John Bostic.
God. He's not a dirty player. I don't want to rake his name
what?
through the mud.
We're not going to get into it too much, but I didn't think it was a dirty play. I didn't think
you
it
don't
was.
think he should have been ejected?
I'm fine with the ejection, but I don't think it's a dirty play, and he's definitely not a dirty player.
I don't think he. No. I don't think he meant harm, but you still can't hit a quarterback who's sliding. I don't care what your argument is. Once you see that quarterback go down, I don't care if you have to leap over him. Yeah, you can change your just dive to the side of him, whatever. As soon as you see him go into that sliding motion, get away from him.
It's not like
hit him in the head.
It's not like Andy Dalton was going to bring that team back. I mean, they had already scored their only 3 points of the game, and they were already down by I think 21 at the time. So the game was all but over at that point, and Ben DiNucci just came in to finish it out.
Yeah. But I believe that Cam Newton, if he were able to come into that Mike McCarthy offense and do that vertical passing game that he would have with Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Dalton Schultz at tight end, and Ezekiel Elliott running behind him, that is quite the dynamic threat that you got going there. On top of the fact that Mike McCarthy's never really had a running type of quarterback, and he is the offensive guru who would be able to utilize him better than Josh McDaniels has to this point. So now I'm going to put these odds at close to 0. I don't think the Patriots trade Cam Newton. I don't think they're looking to trade him. But I do believe that if they do, the Cowboys or the Bears are the best suitors for him at this current state.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I don't see the Patriots trading him until after Week 8's game. If the Patriots get blown out against Buffalo in Buffalo, then I think this is it. Bill's going to say, all right, we're going to give up on the season. We're going to go try to get as good of a pick as possible, probably trade up a few spots and try to grab one of the top quarterbacks in the draft and rock with them. And if we have to go into next season playing Jarrett Stidham for half the season before the rookie takes over, so be it. But I think Bill is starting to realize the situation he's in. All the players that opted out, the players that left in free agency, the players that retired, they're all impacting this team a lot more than he thought. And he's gonna have to realize soon that this team is going nowhere fast, and it's time to offload some of these big contract and big names.
Yeah, for sure. And that would bring us to the other side of the ball for the Patriots and Stephon Gilmore. Big news coming out of New England today that Stephon Gilmore was actually the topic of trade conversations back in March, April, and in August. So teams definitely calling about Stephon Gilmore. We don't know from the Patriots side of things exactly what, if other teams were just calling about him or if they were actually fielding those offers and trying to work out a deal. Obviously, he's still in New England and he's still the number one corner for the team. But needless to say that Bill Belichick and Nick Caserio might be getting together and saying, as good as he is, this is the time that we need to capitalize on his trade value, possibly get a first, maybe 2 first-round picks for him, and then, like you said, maybe go up in the draft. Because if you trade Cam Newton's maybe getting you a 5th or a 6th round pick, maybe. Stephon Gilmore, he's giving you at least a 1st round pick, possibly 2 1st round picks. You can look for almost the same type of deal that Jalen Ramsey got. The only thing is that Stephon Gilmore is considerably older than Jalen Ramsey. And even though he's coming off the Defensive Player of the Year season, he's struggled a little bit this year as well. So I think teams are going to try to capitalize on that. So if I had to look at this, I'd put this at a 45% chance that the Patriots move on from Stephon Gilmore. And I would say that the haul would be a 1st and maybe a 3rd for him.
So I actually mentioned to you this offseason that I felt the Patriots would try to move on from him next season in his last year before the trade deadline to try to recoup something, because you're not going to go pay a 31-year-old cornerback elite money, even though he's playing at an elite level. He's just
Right.
No one at that age is worth that money, especially when you need to be fast. Mm-hmm. So this would be the perfect opportunity while the team is going to go through a rebuild, some sort of a rebuild. Yep. You're going to need to just offload these big contracts. No need to be paying guys like Stephon Gilmore this money, and no reason for Stephon Gilmore to have to sit through a rebuild towards the end of his career. He could go to a contender that needs a cornerback, and there's a bunch of them. Cleveland and Dallas could definitely use him. These are teams that would love to
Dallas
have him.
Can't pay his money.
That's the thing.
Problem.
Dallas would have to restructure a lot of deals, and yes, they just unloaded Everson Griffin, so they made some cap space there. Cleveland would make the most sense because I believe they have the most cap space, over $30 million. You only have to pay Stephon Gilmore about $10 to $12 million for the rest of the season. So this would be a great spot for him. Where they're struggling is with their defensive backs. They've been struggling since Grant Delpit tore his ACL in the leading up to the season opener, and they've been getting crushed. I mean, Joe Burrow just threw for 400 yards on this defense. Yeah. If they can,
Denzel Ward's done a really good job, but it's the other side of the field that they're just teeing off on. So if you can put Denzel Ward as your 2 and Stephon as your 1, that is a very good dynamic duo that you have for the next year and a half.
Absolutely. So there are some definite teams out there, and Cleveland has always been a team Bill is traded with. We've traded a lot with Cleveland over the years, so it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of teams out there that could utilize the services of one Stephon Gilmore. Like I said, I put the trade odds for him at about 45%.
I'd agree with that. I'd probably even boost it a little bit, maybe like 55-60%. I think it's more than likely that he gets
more
traded.
likely than not.
More likely than not. Tom Brady's gone. I don't care about those words anymore.
Okay, just a few more. Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks for the Houston Texans. It's rumored that possibly one of these guys is going to be gone. If you look at their statistics and their production, Brandon Cooks has been the much more productive wide receiver ever since Bill O'Brien has left. If you look at everything that he's done, he's averaged about 9 catches per game. He's averaging double-digit targets, and then on top of that, he's averaging about 80 yards and a touchdown since Bill O'Brien has left. With that being said, he's got the higher trade value. Will Fuller does not, even though Will Fuller is the guy that's not doing anything. They might want to keep him because they want to recoup some of the draft picks that Bill O'Brien, the GM, just discarded, traded away, threw in the trash, whatever you want to call them. But the fact remains that the Houston Texans are in a very, very, very poor position as far as their team, because they're in desperate need of a retooling, a rebuild around Deshaun Watson. They don't have draft picks. I mean, they don't have draft picks and they don't have cap space. I don't understand what they're going to be able to do. I think that during this trade deadline and not even in the next offseason, but Deshaun Watson might become available before his contract is up, and I think that'll be something to watch. But to come back to the wide receivers, I think Brandon Cooks is more likely to get moved because of his trade value, even though he's the more productive wide receiver.
I mean, to think this guy went from the Saints to the Patriots for a 1, from the Patriots to the Rams for a 1, from the Rams to the Texans for a 2. Is he still worth a 2? Probably not. So what's a team going to pay for him? A 4? A 5? Yeah, I mean that's around what you're going to get for him. Houston is not going to recoup one of these.
But what are you paying for Will Fuller?
No, a 2. Will Fuller is an elite wide receiver when healthy. He needs to stay healthy.
When healthy, brackets.
I think that he's proven that he's able to do it. He's more than capable, and there's plenty of teams out there that could use his services. I mean, hey, Cleveland just lost OBJ for the season, so maybe they would be looking to go grab him, or Seattle lost out on Antonio Brown. Maybe go grab him. I mean,
well, they're expected to get Josh Gordon back relatively soon, as soon as Roger Goodell figures out which way his pen works. But I mean, Will Fuller's the wide receiver 4 in Houston, so it's beyond me.
What are you talking about? He's the wide receiver 1.
Kenny Stills.
Kenny Stills is the wide receiver 3 or 4. No, he's the 4. Randall Cobb's the 3. Right. Will Fuller is the number 1 wide receiver on that team. There's no question about that. I don't know the last time you looked at a depth chart, but he has been number 1 since the.
I mean, you can just look at production, but the fact
production.
Remains,
he's been a great wide receiver. He's been a great wide receiver.
Nah. I just see them moving on from Brandon Cooks over Will Fuller. Will Fuller has been their guy. I don't think he's going to command the trade value that you're giving him credit for, because the when healthy portion is the biggest issue for him.
It could also just be a change of scenery. I mean, how many times have we seen a player go from one team to another and either perform better or stay healthy? It happens all the time. I mean, latest victim, Nelson Aguilar. He's been a stud for Oakland since he left Philly. It just happens that way. Or players just happen to act differently and play differently when in a new atmosphere. So that could definitely help Will Fuller, and that could end his curse of being injured all the time. But Brandon Cooks or Will Fuller, if they're saying one of these has to be moved, I would agree. I think Will Fuller is the guy for Houston. They're going to try to stick with him. Brandon Cooks is the odd man out. So I would think that they would probably try to move on from him. And in which case, I'm not really sure where he fits in. What team would be looking for him? Green Bay. I mean, obviously Green Bay is going to be a team looking for any type of wide receiver that has 2 hands and 2 feet. But
they have a receiver named Marquez Valdez-Scantling that doesn't know how to utilize his feet and his hands at the same exact time. And that, for fantasy owners that have to go against Davante Adams, I think they're looking for any receiver to come into Green Bay and catch some passes from Aaron Rodgers, because Davante Adams gets about 84 receptions and 6,000 yards per game. I think that's something around what he averages. So
this will be one to look forward to, look more into, and watch as the deadline approaches. Because if they're saying one's going to be moved, I would expect one to be moved, since they're not playing for anything and they're trying to recoup picks. They don't forget, Miami owns their first and second round picks this year, so they are not going to get any better. What did they get from trading away arguably the best wide receiver in football? Oh, that's right, a second round pick. And David Johnson, who's been amazing, right? Amazing.
I told you I hated David Johnson from that point on. He is a shell of himself, and he will never be the same player as he was in his Pro Bowl year. Moving on. Harrison Smith, the massive safety for the Vikings. Their their run stuffer. He does everything. He's a most feared player. Just his sheer size and athletic ability are unmatched at his position. I think that he definitely will get moved at the trade deadline. They're shopping him actively. They've made teams known that they're shopping him. I think that the haul for him isn't going to be very big because they're so desperate to get away from him, and they're desperate because they're not going anywhere. Minnesota isn't really
Well,
competing.
it seems like they've already given up on the season. Daniil Hunter's out for the year. He just had surgery. You just traded away Yannick Ngakoue and lost you went from a second round pick to a third round pick after that whole ordeal played itself out. And
Right.
now you're looking to trade both your safeties. Really, Anthony Harris is also a free agent at the end of this year, and these are two Pro Bowl safeties. So there's a lot of spots for them. A lot of teams that need safety help that are contending this year. So I would expect these guys to be moved, and it looks like Vikings are just saying we're not only giving up in the season, we're going through a rebuild. Kirk Cousins isn't going to be the guy. We messed up by just extending his contract. So but while we have him, we're going to have to rebuild.
Yeah, I think that they need to kind of hit a small reset button because I do believe that they have specific pieces in place. I like their offensive line. Obviously, the 1-2 duo of Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison on top of Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson is really great. I think they need to find a new quarterback. I think that they need to fix that defense. They saw 3 cornerbacks go in the offseason. Obviously, Daniil Hunter go down with an injury, trading for and then away Yannick Ngakoue and losing draft spot in that entire sequence of events. They lost Anthony Barr to injury, their Pro Bowl middle linebacker. So they got decimated across the board, and I think they need to move on from some older veteran players, give them a change of scenery, give them an opportunity to go win somewhere else, and then just kind of hit, like I said, a small, not a rebuild, but just a small reset button.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I think it's more than a small reset button. This team has been decimated through the loss of players in the offseason and the lack of ability that Kirk Cousins is missing. You're not going to go anywhere. As we see with Chicago, you're only going to go as far as your quarterback, and that's not looking too good. So
Right.
with that new contract Kirk Cousins just got, I mean, I don't know when they're going to be looking for a new quarterback or when they're going to be looking to draft somebody, but yeah, I don't see them turning this ship around for at least a few years.
It'll be interesting. But another ship that hasn't been turned around in a few years was Atlanta. The Atlanta Falcons look to possibly be maybe looking for a deal for Julio Jones. Arguably, again, a top 5 receiver, top 3 receiver in the NFL. His talent is unmatched. He's obviously older now. Nobody's questioning his production. They're questioning his ability to stay on the field and healthy. With that being said, I think Atlanta will not move on from Julio Jones. I would say that there's about a 25% chance that they move on from Julio Jones, but he has a very large contract, and that I think that's going to be the big deterrent because when you look at every team for next year, there are many teams that are very over the cap because of the $25 million reduction in cap space from this season to next. So I think a lot of teams that would be in on him are going to be hesitant because of the amount of money that he's going to command over the next 3 to possibly 4 seasons.
Yeah, I would agree that I don't think he's going to get traded now. And we heard the rumors as the Atlanta Falcons were losing every single game horribly. And then they won one game, and Arthur Blank was like, yeah, he's not on the trade block. But then they just lost to the Lions at the very last second. And I would expect that Julio Jones is being brought up in some conversations around the league. But again, you brought it up, that price tag of $20 million a season. He signed that 3-year deal. I believe it was before last season. So you still got another year with that contract, plus this a half a year with this.
And then there's an option for a 4th year to extend it.
Yeah, so it's not a good contract, and that's really what's hurting them. I don't expect Julio to be traded before the deadline this year.
No.
I guarantee he'll be traded by the deadline next year.
Yeah, I would assume that it'll be an off-season trade. I think a team that's looking to retool and rebound, and they're looking for a top receiver.
Atlanta's going to have to eat some of this contract at some point. There's no way any team is taking on this full contract, and I think Atlanta will be fine with that. So it's just a matter
They're
of...
going to have to be, unfortunately.
It's going to take longer than the less than week we have to figure out all the details of that contract, because it's going to be very elaborate.
For sure. And then the final person that we want to talk about, Jets defensive tackle Quinnen Williams. There's a lot of speculation whether Quinnen Williams is part of the fire sale that Joe Douglas is, going through right now. The Jets have been offloading relatively unknown or non-essential pieces. I've seen them trade away a few pieces, got some conditional 6th-round picks and stuff like that, but nothing crazy. But we're looking at certain names like Brian Poole and Quinnen Williams and can't think of the
Jamison Crowder.
Thank you, Jamison Crowder. I mean, these are big names that Joe Douglas might want to deal and try to get more ammunition, because it seems like, he's not willing to spend a single dime when it comes to the offseason, but he's willing to do all his homework and do everything properly at the draft. So if he's going to succeed at his job, he's definitely going to have to gather as many draft picks as humanly possible. So with that being said, Quinnen Williams on the block, what do you see as the chances of him being moved, and then where he would fit, and
I actually think
what it would take?
I actually think the chances of Quinnen Williams being traded are quite high. This is a guy that a lot of teams have been interested in. They have thrown out their asking price in public, actually, saying that we think he's worth a 2. And then Joe Douglas responding saying, I actually think he's worth multiple 2s. So now it's time for teams to respond, okay, maybe we're willing to give up multiple 2s, or a 2 and a 3 and a 4 for this guy. I think that Quinnen Williams is extremely talented and can help every defensive line in the league.
He's got 3 more years left on his rookie deal.
Exactly. This is a very young guy with a bright future ahead of him, and it doesn't seem like it's going to happen in New York. And this is the time to get him before Adam Gase is gone, before they start retooling this team under a competent head coach. So
this depends on who they choose. Could be Freddie Kitchens.
I wouldn't put it past him, but I do. As cheap as Joe
Johnson type of move to make.
As cheap as Joe Douglas is, I think he's a smart guy and won't let any fool just walk into this head coaching position.
Have you met anybody from the Jets organization? Have you seen how they operate? Stephen A can laugh at the Cowboys as much as he wants. We're all missing the simple fact that we should just be laughing at the Jets 24/7.
I think we just feel sorry for the players at this point.
Nah, never feel sorry. But I do believe that you're right. I think Quinnen Williams will get moved sooner rather than later. I think they're going to try everything in their power to get something done before the trade deadline. Because again, the Jets are going nowhere fast. Their planes are grounded. They are not going anywhere. So the fact remains that I believe that if they can command 2 2s or 2 2s and a 4 or something crazy like that, I think that'll be.
I mean, Quinnen was a top 10 pick 2 years ago. He's got to be.
Wasn't he number 3?
He might have been number 3.
I think he was number 3.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're talking about a guy who's still that same guy. They're not trading him because of lack of production. They're trading him because they just need draft picks. They need to reset the entire roster. and that's going to take some time. And Quinnen Williams is going to be basically aged out of his rookie contract by then. They're not going to be wanting to pay him. So get the most you can out of him now, because the longer you wait, the less teams are going to be willing to pay for him, because the less time they'll have him on his rookie deal.